All right, next up, let's talk about building a chord progression from a melody. So if you're one of those people that likes to write a melody first, like a lot of people, like I might venture to say most people like to write a melody first, but I don't know that for a fact. How do you figure out what chords to put on the melody? So to figure this out, first thing is we need a melody. So let's stick to A minor. And I'm just going to kind of write a random melody that's in A minor. Maybe I'll do half notes mostly. So I'll start on A. It doesn't have to start on A. Melodies don't have to start on A, or don't have to start on the root of the key. They can start on whatever they want. But let's start this one on A. So let's go A, B, C. We'll do those two quick notes. Then we'll go down to B and hold that. Then I'll do, let's make a leap here to maybe E. And then F. I'm being kind of as random as I can here. Down to C. To G. And to E. We'll hold that out. Okay. So here's my super random melody. It's not entirely random because it's all in key, but I didn't really think all that much about that. Okay, so I'm still using this like super dark, weird synth patch and these drums. So it's already got kind of this dark, almost trip hop feel to it. But that's cool. It's also in a minor key, so it's got that going for it. So let's look at what chords we could use. So I'm going to do the opposite of what I did last time. Let's get rid of that. So this is my piano track up here. So I'm just going to copy my melody into the piano track so that I can leave the melody on the melody track, but pull apart the piano part. So we're going to figure out what chords could work on this. And let's say I want one chord per bar, just like we did in the last track. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look for these like kind of third relationships. So I have in this bar, I'm going to go bar by bar. So in this bar, I have A, B, and C. So if I was to look at my whole diatonic chord progression, I would find, so here's my key right here. Let's build an A minor chord, my first, third, fifth. And actually, I'll build a couple of these. Here's my 2 chord in minor, which is that diminished, remember? So we probably will avoid that one, but who knows? Let's build a couple more of these. There's our 4 chord, our 5 chord. We'll just do that many. Okay. So, looking back here, A, B, and C. Let's see how many of those notes I can get to fit into a single chord. So, of my chords, does any of them have an A, a B, and a C? If they have all 3, then hey, that's a great chord to use. Now, always remember we have a couple options here. If we only have one note, there are 3 or 4 options at least. 3 or 4 obvious options. But we'll get to that in a minute. For now, we have these 3 notes, and I already know that, well, I know because I'm just going to tell you, we can find a chord where 2 of those notes will work. A, B, and C. One of them is going to be a passing note, and it's going to be this B. So we can see here A and C in our 1 chord, in an A minor chord. Do we have an A and a C in any other chords? Not in anything we've drawn out here. If we keep going, we'll get one. Actually, if we go 1 more chord, we'll get one. So if we go here to the 6th chord, F, A, and C. So F would work, as would A, C, and E. So 2 different chords, the 1 chord and the 6th chord. One's a major chord and one's a minor chord. So we could use whatever we want. Let's use an A minor chord here. We'll keep it simple. So I'm going to stretch this out. I'm going to turn this into just a chord. So there's my A minor chord. Now my second bar has just one melody note. So that means I have 3 or maybe 4 options, like I just said a minute ago. So I need to look at all my chords that have this one note in it. Now you're going to have, if you're just looking at triads, you're going to have 3 options, because this note could be the root of our chord, it could be the third of our chord, or it could be the fifth of our chord. Or if we want to get fancy, we could even say it could be the 7th of our chord. So let's look for a B in here. So here's a B on our 2 chord. So if it's the root, it's our 2 chord. Remember, that's a diminished chord. We don't really like that one. So let's cancel that one out. We're not going to use that one. What are our other options? We could use, here it is as the 5th, and that is the E chord. It's an E minor chord. That's a good option. So that's a good option. If we kept going up one more chord, I suppose I should have just drawn out this whole thing from the get-go, but that's okay. We get up to the 7 chord, the 7th chord in the key. We get the one that has the 3rd in it, and it's a G chord. It's a G major chord. So our good options here, the 2 chord, not such a good option. The good options are the E chord, which is the 5th, and the G chord, which is the 7th. So we can decide which one we want. I mean, we're kind of in composition mode here, so both of these chords are going to work just great. One of the things you might consider is that one of them is a major chord and one of them is a minor chord. So you might think, do you want a major sound or a minor sound here? I'm gonna go with the G chord. We'll be a little weirder. Oh, let's look at what our other options could be. What if that B was the 7th? So let's go up one more scale degree on all of these. Okay, I could keep going, but this is the one I want. If I did it as a C, it would give me that 7th. I don't think I want to do that. I think that's going to be a little too intense for this kind of dark trip-hoppy sound that I want. So I'm going to go with the G chord. Okay, so let's turn this into a G chord. I need a G, and there's my 3rd, and then my 5th will be a D here. Okay, so now that melody note works in there just great. Now here I have an E and an F. Those are half steps apart, so they're not going to be found in any single chord. There's not going to be a chord that has an E in it and an F in it. Well, I take that back. We will have one. This chord, the 6th chord, if we added a 7 to it, we would have both of those, but I don't think that's what we really want. That's not quite the right sound. It's going to be a little too... Remember, this is that major 7th chord. That sounds really pretty. I kept saying it sounded pretty. So we could put that in this tune, but what we have going so far, we have this really dark sound, and if we put this really pretty sounding chord in it, we're going to get ourselves in a little bit of trouble. It's going to start to sound really confused. So let's not do that. Since this F is shorter, let's treat it as a passing tone. So let's say E is the chord tone. So my options are here, the 1 chord, again, the 3 chord, which is major, there's the E, and then there's going to be one chord, there's going to be a chord, where it's the root. So here it is as the 5th, here it is as the 3rd, and here it is as the root. So an E minor chord, our 5 chord. So in this case, maybe I'll think about where I've come from. I have an A, a G, and this is a minor chord, and this is a major chord. Let's be sure we get another minor chord in there so that we keep the sound of the darkness of the sound. I could go back to that 1 chord. That's awfully appealing. Let's do that. So I'm just going to copy this over. So I'm going to use the 1 chord again here. So now we've got 1 chord, the E fits in the chord, and then it goes to an F. That's okay. So that F, that's the melody. So I'm going to get rid of that here because I don't want it right in the chord necessarily. I'm just going to stretch that out so that the chord takes up the whole measure. Okay, here I've got 3 chords. I've got a C, a G, and an E. And as luck would have it, I swear I didn't plan that, we do have a chord that has all 3 of those notes. C, E, and G right there. So our 3 chord has all 3 of those. But there's actually one more chord that has all 3 of those too. Let's find it. It's actually going to be our 1 chord with a 7, C, E, and a G, with the G being the 7th. So it could be our 1 chord, again, it would be with the 7th. It would be a minor 7th chord. But I'm not going to use that only because I'm coming from my 1 chord and I want to be sure I go to a different chord. So let's use that 3 chord, C, E, G. And I've got everything I need right here. I don't need to do anything. Okay, so I just kind of grouped notes together and found notes that fit. There are passing tones in it. That's the way it's going to be. That makes for an interesting melody. Remember, if you don't have any passing tones or any notes that are not in the chord for long periods of time, you're going to end up sounding pretty boring. So don't be afraid to just throw those extra notes that are in key but not in the chord. Just throw them around and see what happens. Okay, last thing before we hear this is I'm going to do a little inverting. So I'm going to take this G, since it's the highest note, I'm going to move it down an octave. That actually gets me all pretty tight, where I'm not moving around too much. So let's hear what we've got. I'm going to move this down an octave. I want to hear this note. I'm going to add this D here. That D just gives us a little flavor of it's the only note that's not in this chord in the melody, and it also just kind of helps us push us back to this A. So just kind of gives it a nice feeling for when it's looping. Okay, so there you go. So just remember when you have a melody and you're trying to find chords for it, just try to find groups of notes in the melody and see what chords you can make most of the notes work in, and then put it together. There's a lot of option here, and this is why this is kind of what separates music theory from like actual like composition and producing. Like now we're like creating stuff. So we don't want to always follow the rules 100%. You got to break them to do interesting stuff. All right, onward.